that the Henry Jackson Society would itself be on the list of extreme organisations on this basis of Prevent, because it certainly is a right-wing think tank.
Well, in the way you've just put it there, standing for our values and having pride in the West and pride in who we are, put you on that list, as you've explained, which would then very much put us on the list too. But I would take a slightly different interpretation of why these things were on the list. And I think it was less because they thought it was a threat and more because they were wanting to look palatable to the general public, look like they were balancing the books, look like they were opposing all forms of what they considered to be extremism. That's what they were doing rather than thinking we were general threats.
And what were they thinking about the ideology of Islamism? How were they focusing on that? How were they interacting with that?
So this was very difficult and thorny topic because we were set up to tackle terrorism, the biggest threat being from Islamist extremism. So it goes without question that is absolutely what we should have been focusing on. However, we were met with a fear internally, a fear from local authority, and a fear from the general public to really tackle that issue. So I would have a conflict with fellow colleagues I was in Prevent and then in counter-extremism, colleagues around actually tackling Islamist extremist organisations. At one point, I was told that I had some sort of unhealthy obsession with Islamist extremist organisations. In fact, my specialty, my expertise in this topic was my very undoing in the role.
Because you actually knew about it and you were willing to look at the risks from extremism.
Yeah, I was absolutely held with suspicion, just as William Shawcross said.
And William Shawcross also said that some of these organisations actually had links with Prevent, that Prevent got friendly with them to some extent.
We had those working within the Home Office or Prevent practitioners. We are trained by the Home Office, employed by local authorities, that were completely ideologically misaligned. So yes, there were occasions, shockingly, where Prevent practitioners did grow close, align themselves with those that were on the list of Islamist extremist organisations held by the Home Office.
So if they were getting into that position, how could they possibly investigate them and prevent future radicalisation and extremism?
Well, they can't. And you can't begin to imagine how difficult this situation is, because you're dealing with those that are ideologically misaligned within. Then you're dealing with local authorities. I was based in a Labour local authority that then had its issue around the sensitivity of votes and concern about how it appeared in the public eye. So they were very cautious about it too. And then you had those that are genuinely feared for their own safety. You look at Bateley Grammar School, you look at what's just happened with Wakefield, you look at the actual aggressive threats to blasphemy, and people are frightened to do this work. So how many people really are going to stick the course and effectively do this work? Not many.
And where do you see the problem lying? Was it with the Home Office or with the local council, or was it actually in the structure of Prevent, which may seem to be what William Shawcross was indicating?
Absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. You have got the structure being that we are placed and employed by local authorities that are politically actually somewhat against the Prevent agenda in itself. Then you've got a Home Office that poorly recruited. We're talking about an emerging threat that not a lot of people are experts in. There's not a lot of us to recruit from. So we had poorly recruited individuals. And then you've got a societal ill in which we find it so difficult to critique anything other than that which is power and authority. Essentially, the white man is the only thing that can be criticised.
And there was no legal definition of Islamism, so that you didn't know particularly what the threat was that you were looking for, what the radical Islamic threat was.
With this point, in my experience, maybe it was what I took on, but I felt like we did have training on what Islamism was, but we had infighting about that and infighting about how we should tackle it. I came away as an expert, and I am now an expert at the Henry Jackson Society, but not everyone in there was an expert or left an expert. So that may come down to personal differences.
And we need expertise, don't we? But speaking as a Catholic and looking at the history of Catholicism in this country, there was a suspicion at one point of all Catholics. Just by being a Catholic, you were suspicious, even though most Catholics were law-abiding and peaceful, which is also very fundamentally true of most Muslims, law-abiding, peaceful people committed to the country. It's just this very small number of extreme radicals. How do you try and differentiate to make sure that you're treating the bulk of people who are good people fairly?
Well, absolutely. And I think there was a recent study that was done by Crest that looked at support from the British Muslim community for tackling Islamist extremism. And it found that within the British Muslim public, just 4% less than the general public are really concerned about Islamist extremism. 80% of them support the Prevent programme. So we are looking at a distinct minority. But the issue is whenever we talk about Islamist extremism, because of the way Islamists have held the narrative on this and the narrative on Prevent and the narrative on counter-extremism, we are made to feel when we're talking about it, and the public is hearing that we're talking about Muslims as a whole because of the way the narrative has been owned. But we are talking about a distinct section, and we need to get comfortable with tackling that. This is a section that believes that women should be in servitude, the LGBT community should not exist, and blasphemers should be killed. They are the antithesis of leftist thinking, and that is what we should be opposing.
But at the same time, it's very important not to marginalise the Muslim community, who, as you say, are strongly opposed to this and are concerned about it.
And that needs to be an easy thing to understand and get our heads around. We need to get comfortable with this. It's not too hard to understand.
Well, it shouldn't be, but clearly it was with your experience that people were...
We were responding to a way of thinking in society which is a concern around tackling anything that isn't coming from perceived power or the white man, as I've said already. So when you're looking at tackling something that does exist within a minority, you are worried because you feel like you may be critiquing the wider minority, but you are not. We're talking about a distinct section, and we must tackle it because this is fascism, this is the right wing.
And so then they come on to people with anti-Brexit or pro-Brexit views, people like me, as a sort of balance because they feel embarrassed about who they're looking at. That's what they did to you.
They used you for balance.
And that's a complete... I mean, that undermines the whole purpose of what they're trying to do because everybody
Absolutely,
then laughs
what a waste of our money.
Well, thank you for what you've been doing and for your courage on tackling it and coming on. I wish you every success with the Henry Jackson Society.